Hi, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to our webinar titled My Colleague Tried to Bring What Through Customs? Best Practices for Hand Carries and Carnets in Corporate Business Travel Policies. My name is Amanda Barlow, and I am the Vice President of Risk Management and Business Affairs for Rocket Cargo. Rocket Cargo is a global leader in logistics across music, sports, film, TV, and experiential events, and more. We've been operating since 1978, and Rocket Cargo manages global logistics through end-to-end services from multimodal freight, planning, storage, distribution solutions, and of course, we're an ATA carnet supplier. Rocket Cargo is a GCL company and part of a platform of brands that include SOS Global, Dynamic, Deedle, and Cars, which together make up a global network of 60 offices in 18 countries and with over 10,000 missions a year. We're very proud of that. As a sponsor and speaker for our discussion today, I'd like to thank the AEI and all of you for joining us to discuss, one, the best practices for incorporating hand carry and carnet guidelines into corporate travel policies, two, steps to ensure seamless export and import of commercial goods by individual travelers, and three, real-world scenarios and tips to prevent customs pitfalls. And now I'd like to turn things over to our moderator, Kelly Milanti. Kelly?
Thank you, Amanda. Hello, everyone. I'm Kelly Milianti. I am Carnet Manager at Roanoke Insurance Group, and I am pleased to be guiding our discussion today. Business travelers often play a critical role in transporting commercial goods, whether for urgent shipments or high-value items. However, without proper guidance on hand carry and carnet procedures, they risk costly delays, compliance violations, and unexpected challenges at the border. Our goal today is to provide you with clear best practices and practical steps to ensure seamless export and import of commercial goods by individual travelers. We'll also walk through real-world scenarios and share expert tips to help your company avoid common customs pitfalls. Amanda and I are joined by Yolanda Sanchez-Aranda, Product Manager at Time Matters. Welcome, Yolanda.
Thank you, Kelly.
To kick things off, let's start with Amanda. What is the craziest thing you've had to deal with that made you say, my colleague tried to bring what through customs?
So thankfully for us, it wasn't a colleague of mine, but it was a client who had a huge sales opportunity to present jewelry collection to a large household name department store in the UK. You can all guess who that department store is. He jumped on a flight with the jewelry collection, arrived in London Heathrow Airport, and UK Customs said, can you pay us £80,000? In order to enter and make the sales meeting, or you need to get an ATA carnet. And you can imagine £80,000 standing in an airport looking at customs with very high valuable jewelry was a little much for the jeweler. Needless to say, he called me and flew back to the US, picked up the carnet, flew back to the UK in time for his sales presentation. And now he actually distributes to that department store. As you can imagine, he's a very loyal and avid ATA carnet user since this rather costly learning experience.
Okay. Yolanda, did you want to share a story as well?
Yes, not with carnet, because I'm more like a general hand carry clearance. But yes, I would like to share. Well, firstly, hello, everybody. And I'm obviously a specialist, and as obviously a specialist, I've been dealing with different type of mission, and I would like to share one that I did myself. Basically, it was one from Amsterdam to Atlanta. I needed to deal with 10 big boxes, oversized, overweight. So basically, you can imagine in Europe, the trolleys are quite small. In general, in Europe, everything is small, so the trolleys were small. So I have to deal with 10 big boxes from the driver to the custom export office, and then from the custom office to the airline counter. So I was dealing one by one box from one point to another. And you can imagine myself, I was smaller than the boxes. So most of the people at the airport, they were wondering what is doing the tiny girl with so many boxes just moving through the airport. Most of them, they were thinking that I was moving a full family. So indeed, it was 10 boxes, one by one. So 10 times from the driver to custom entity, from custom entity to the airline, and then from the airline, of course, it was with previous advice to be authorized by the airlines. Then we move it to outside. And once, let's say, the process in Amsterdam was completed, the cargo was flying without any problem, then I arrived to US. And in US, luckily, there, let's say everything is bigger. So I managed to collect the 5 boxes and put it in 2 trolleys. They are quite big, so I managed to divide 5 and 5 and take it to customs, and there went quite smoothly. But yeah, everything went smooth, even if I was moving like a big cargo. But everything is possible with the right documents and the right advice.
All right, thank you. Okay, so what are the most common mistakes business travelers make when hand carrying commercial goods, and how can companies proactively prevent this?
Sure, I can start off. So my immediate answer is not calling their compliance department. And no, in all seriousness, common mistakes in the hand carry environment is that business people traveling with commercial goods do not actually take customs requirements into consideration. When traveling with commercial items, customs declaration has to be done at the airport before exiting the secure area. And if these items are not going to be, and if these items are going to be entered temporarily, which is common in the hand carry environment, then some sort of financial guarantee needs to be made to customs so the goods can be entered into the country. Because customs needs to be assured, and that's what a financial guarantee does, that either the goods will be entered temporarily and re-exported out, or in the event that they're not re-exported because business purposes change, that customs does have a recourse to get the duties and taxes owed on those items entered. So common types of financial guarantees are paying the estimated duties and taxes and getting reimbursed after export, or presenting an ATA carnet, or doing a temporary importation under bond if that option is in that country. Now, the catch is paying the duties and taxes requires a cash transaction at the customs office in the airport. A TIB option would need to be arranged in advance, and typically that needs to be coordinated with a customs broker in country. And not every country has TIBs as an option or even allows TIBs for hand carry entries. ATA carnet is by far the best option as it acts like your personal passport, but for your goods, and is arranged in advance in the US. So really the key is to ensure that a company has a business travel policy that includes a policy on hand carrying commercial items for business purposes, and a best contact in the compliance team to discuss the best options to fulfill those customs requirements in country of travel, because it varies. It's based on type of commercial goods, length of intended stay, purpose of the goods while in the foreign country, and so on. So a real discussion with compliance in advance of any business travel with commercial goods, I think, is essential and is the essential learning message here.
Okay. Can you talk a little bit about what should not go on a carnet?
Sure, I can happily take that one. What should not go in a carnet? Consumables. So if you're taking a marketing materials or a trade show booth, so you're taking your booth, right? What's going in must come out on a carnet. So with booth exhibitors, we see this a lot, is you're taking in the pop-up signage, the banners, the decor, all that fun stuff. And then you may also take giveaways, tchotchkes, booth, incentives for people to come to visit your booth. Anything that's being given away cannot be on a carnet. And same with consumables. So the rule is what goes in must come out on an ATA carnet in the same manner it went in. So consumables, we see it a lot, especially for us in the sports media world. We move a lot of the big sports teams, and we'll get trunks full of, body washes and deodorants, first aid kits. Obviously, all of those are consumables, and so they cannot be on an ATA carnet.
All right, thanks, Amanda. How can business integrate clear hand carry and carnet procedures into the corporate travel policies to ensure compliance and minimize risk?
So sure, I can jump in on this one. So there, from my perspective, my opinion and experiences, it needs to be a joint initiative between human resources, legal, and compliance to structure the policy that balances the business needs with compliance, and then ensures a rollout is actually effective, and that to all those that may conduct business travel with commercial goods. It's one thing to have a policy in place, and it's another to make sure those who need to know about it indeed know where it is. Now, the policy could be as simple as, if you're traveling with commercial goods, call compliance for guidance on the best option to fulfill any customs requirements. As the options vary depending on the commodity, the country of travel. Another option is to require an ATA carnet full hand carry shipments where their carnets are accepted, and then provide a contact to obtain the carnet. This could be as simple as having a funnel through an in-house person to manage the request, or an outside service that can also be requested that then can partner with your business travelers to help them navigate their options. And it really all depends what best fits the business needs. And it must be driven by a compliance, legal, and HR should also be involved from my standpoint.
And if Kelly, if I can add something what Amanda just said, from the hand carry general cargo point of view, I will add always a company needs to be aware. I call it like the 3 point, the safety, compliance, and control. Safety, because you need to put always yourself in the shoes of the person, is your employee or a professional onboard courier, always in the shoes that person, where you are going to send that person. Because there are a specific country, like an example is Brazil, where by law is not recognized the hand carry clearance. So for example, you cannot send your OBC or your employee to that country because he will face issues at customs. And the same if there is a country that is in a war or in a let's say in a difficult situation, of course you don't want to send the same because of safety reasons. So always we need to prioritize the well-being preparation, of course, the person that we are sending. And regarding compliance is basically what Amanda also said. We need to make sure that we have all the customs and legal requirements that we met, that we need to have it in place. And then, of course, we need to have a kind of control, a clear internal policies and pre-approval process to make sure that the person that is traveling is aware about every step that he or she should follow.
Okay. Can you share a real-world example of customs challenges faced by business travelers and what steps were taken to resolve them?
Yeah, I can jump into that. I can continue. Actually, I don't have many examples, but lately we have one. It was not because there was any issue with the documents or anything, but we have one case exactly for from Edinburgh Airport to Madrid. We have a mission from Edinburgh Airport to Madrid, and this specific obviously, he was at the airport around 6 a.m. So he was ready on time, everything ready, documents with the cargo in hand. And unluckily, the custom officer, he was facing a problem with the custom system. And by surprise, he advised to our OBC to just take the phone number, just proceed to the airplane, and that he can make a call once he lands at Madrid. So he followed actually what the custom authorities advised him. But yeah, it's not advisable. Later, we just discovered, because it took us like 48 hours to close that MRN. And by what I learned from that case, because it seems that the agent who was working at that time, it seems that he was new. So maybe this is why I advise to the OBC in that way. So my advice is always to stay until the document is closed, because later it requires a lot of extra work. And if there is time in place, in that case, we have over 1 hour. So it's better to wait and make sure that the custom officer, because at the end it's his work, he find a way to solve the problem and make the documentation in the system before the departure, because later it's more difficult once the shipment has departure. And another example into US could be, we have a mission also to Atlanta. In that case, the OBC was ready. The customers should have provided the import, the entry number, the import documents in that case. But unluckily, the customer was facing issues with the customs, so the entry number. In that case, once as the OBC was already there, also taking in consideration that for that mission, the goods were, the value of the goods, they were around $200. So it was below $800 US. So in that case, as plan B, of course, we always, if the customer couldn't provide the import documents, we have our custom clearance partner in US. So we were requesting for help for that case. But in addition, we asked the OBC to check with custom authorities because in some specific cases, it depends on the goods, it's possible and it's allowed to do self-clearance. And luckily in that case, it went even faster because the custom authorities in Atlanta, they authorized to do the self-clearance. So indeed, the OBC took just 10 minutes to do the self-clearance, and yeah, we could meet the time for the delivery on time as we agree with the customer. So it was at the end, the small issue that we faced at the beginning because we didn't have the entry number on time. At the end, it was solved easily.
Okay.
Kelly,
What
do you want me to add any more stories?
Sure, if you have, go ahead.
Yeah, I've got it. Very similar to Yolanda's example is, so we had a client of ours who was traveling in Mexico on an ATA carnet, and it was a live rock band tour. And he had looked on Mexican Customs website for the hours and times of the customs port at the Nuevo Laredo border crossing to return to the United States. This was on a Sunday. He took what was on the website and he showed up customs, and they basically said, no, we're closed. The guy with the key to get the stamp is not available. I think he was at a football game or something. And he just stood there and he would say, it's Sunday. He's like, what do I do? So we ended up air freighting as excess baggage actually back to Mexico City, and then had someone pick it up in Mexico City to return it to the United States, because he had to cross the border to get back to the US for a different tour. So it's you never quite know when you're traveling, and you try and rely on websites and information, but definitely talking to people on the ground who know what's going on and can tell you, oh yeah, the website says they're open 24/7, but actually these are the true hours of customs, and you just never know what could possibly happen at the border crossing. But in addition, as we're talking about Mexico, another example, hand carrying commercial goods into Mexico on an ATA carnet is probably one of the good, if not the best options over what's the pedimento temporal. However, there are a lot of things you need to do in advance and you need to be aware of to make sure that it goes smoothly. Otherwise, it's an absolute nightmare. So for example, you have to register the carnet 3 days in advance of travel, saying that you're arriving on such and such date with commercial goods on a carnet. Notate 2 is really notating the confirmation number of the registration from the customs portal on the import counterfoils for ease of reference by Mexican Customs. And most importantly, make sure you're out of Mexico before 6 months restrictions are up. So even though ATA carnets are issued for a 12-month period, every entry into Mexico on a carnet is restricted to 6 months. If you stay beyond those 6 months without alerting the port of entry, you're getting out of Mexico with your commercial goods is a nightmare, not to mention extremely costly, as they charge by the day of overstay, and they expect this payment to be settled with the customs officials at the airport in cash in order to exit the country. So it's not ideal. So really, I think the moral of my stories is to know before you go into each country, as there really is no one solution fits all for every country.
Okay, so we have a couple of questions in the chat. Let's see. What would be the difference between using carnet versus tool of trade for items that will be imported for a job and then returned?
I think the question is about tools of the trade under Chapter 98. If I'm correct, I'll just go down that path. Is that good, Kelly?
Yeah, please.
Okay, so when we think of tools of the trade, every HTS classification system has different accommodations under Chapter 98 for temporary entries and duty-free entries. So you have to be aware that while you're traveling internationally, you're not only worried about like the one country of import that you're going into, you also have to worry about exporting out of the United States. So if the US has tools of the trade, you can export, you re-import under Chapter 98, that's fine. But what about the country of entry? Do they permit tools of the trade as an option to enter that country, or do they not? And I will say we do a lot of carnets for people traveling with tools because it's just easier. The documents are prepared in advance. You know what you're going to expect. Customs has a valid document in front of them when you're entering, so they know that you're taking business seriously and you understand that you're bringing these goods in, and there is a financial guarantee promising customs with that carnet that you will be re-exporting.
Okay. What about hand carry items that are not going to be returned back to the US? Commercial invoices and AEI if required. Are there any other required documentation for this type of export?
So it depends. Well, I can't reply to that, and basically it depends of the value as well. Most of the time is necessary the power of attorney. So most of the broker they will need the power of attorney in order to proceed with the export clearance or import clearance. So usually it's the invoice, power of attorney, packing list, and of course they will need the broker. In that case, they always will need the passport of the person who is flying, the onboard courier usually, and the ticket of the flight is the main documents that they will need in order to proceed with the export and the import. And
Yeah.
it depends on the value and the country.
Yeah, and I'll add to that. It all really depends because filing the EEI out of the United States and having a commercial invoice is great for U.S. Customs for exportation, but not necessarily is going to fulfill the requirements in the foreign country of import. So again, it goes back to it depends on the country, depends on the commodity, depends on the value. The U.S. has an $800 de minimis, so you can come in under $800 without having to make a formal entry. But other countries have lower de minimis's. Some of them are $80, some of them are $200. So you can export out of the U.S. as an informal export under $2,500, but you could arrive in a country and they're going to consider $2,500 or let's say $2,495 a formal entry, and you would have to then make formal entry declaration in that country. You also have to check that the country allows for commercial goods. I think as Yolanda mentioned in her example earlier, Brazil doesn't allow commercial goods to be entered on hand carries, period. So it might not even be an option for hand carries that you're going to leave in country.
Okay. Let's see. We have, what is the process options to close a carnet without penalties if I lost the original carnet?
Oh, this is our favorite question, isn't it, Kelly? I think with any, if you have a hand carry policy and you have hand carry procedures and you're going to be using carnets in the hand carry procedure, I think the number one rule you should put in that manual is photograph. Every time you walk away from customs, snap a smartphone photo of the customs clearance on the counterfoil. We can resolve any claim with that counterfoil, that photograph, smartphone photo. And in today's world, there should be no excuse but to snap that photograph as soon as you walk away from customs. Because if you lose that document, once it's lost, there is no electronic way to capture or get that customs validation proof that it was exported from a foreign country. There is an alternative. Photographs, number one. Two, when you return back to the United States and you realize, the carnet is lost, you cannot find it, and it has not expired. I think that's key, has not expired. You can file a 3227, which is what we call in the trade a citing. And line item 8 on the 3227 says, this is an ATA carnet, U.S. Customs is citing on U.S. soil, and that is an option to be able to resolve a claim with foreign customs. But again, it has to be done before the actual original carnet expires.
Okay. Let's see. The next question is, when I clear hand carry shipments, the LA export asks me to send a cover sheet and all the documents via DIS. Is this required for all the terminals, or every terminal have a different process?
Yeah, this is a fun part of hand carries and U.S. Customs. So a lot of the port level policies are a lot of the customs policies are left up to port director policy, and some customs ports want a certain type of organization in their paperwork because, as you all know, carnets are not filed in ACE, and so when a customs is making the validation of the carnet, he still has to record it in his system. So I know there's a habit of LAX customs requiring a 3461, which we all know doesn't exist anymore now that ACE exists. However, it's for them to have the data elements that they need to put into the system to record that this was exported and allow for cargo release. So it really does vary. Again, my recommendation is, talk to your compliance team, talk to your broker forwarder. A lot of us have on-ground experience and can tell you exactly what each port really does in real life. Talk to your OBC couriers as well. I mean, they're in and out of airports all the time dealing with these type of situations and can give that insight, as it does vary by port in the US alone, let alone globally.
Yeah. Okay. What is the process for an ATA carnet if I decide to ship the items instead of hand carry? Is it even a possibility?
It's absolutely a possibility. If you get your carnet for a hand carry shipment and then you realize you have more time and you can freight it with your forwarder, that's not a problem. As long as you have a power of attorney for the customs brokerage operating under behalf of the forwarder, they can just pick it up and hand carry. And the same happens if you decide you get the carnet for a freight shipment and then, last minute happens. I mean, this is the world we live in. Everything's time critical for us. Musicians love changing wardrobe at the last hour. And so we're then switching from a freight environment into the hand carry. And as long as the carnet documents, we have them and we can just grab an onboard courier and get it on the flight, it's pretty seamless.
Okay. We have some equipment that has been purchased by our engineering group and will be sent to Japan for integration of another piece of equipment being built. For these cases, we are not able to use a carnet.
Nope. No, it's being basically it's going into Japan for consumption into equipment. Now, if the components are going in for a certain period of time, we see this with the maquilas in Mexico where they're taking like I can't remember the technical term, but basically equipment goes in, they manufacture something to a specific shape and size, they bring that equipment out. That is a possible, as long as it's going in and coming out. But if it's going in, it's being put in a machine and left there permanently, then no, the ATA carnet is not an option.
Okay. We have tremendous trouble shipping goods under carnet and having the carnet stay with the goods and being returned to us. Any advice?
My advice is never ship the carnet along with the freight unless it's hand carried. I think we always say don't put the carnet inside the box because it needs to be available for customs clearance. Don't affix it to the side of the box because it will be removed during the movement of freight. It needs to be couriered separately. So basically, if you're sending it freight, your broker in the US will handle it in the US, will export it out. They'll have the document package. It'll overnight it to the recipient arrival place, country. The agent will meet up with the freight and clear the carnet in that way. So the carnet and cargo need to meet up at customs for customs clearance, but they should not transit affixed to each other, if that answers the question.
Okay. If you lose the carnet, don't you have the option to use your duplicate copy? You are quoted an extra copy, and aren't you supposed to use that one in lieu of the original? I can answer this one.
Go for it, Kelly.
So you can apply for a duplicate carnet, which will then take the place of that original carnet. So basically, you would continue to use the carnet. So if you're in the foreign country and you have lost your carnet, you apply for the duplicate. You can present the duplicate carnet to foreign customs so you can get that stamp showing that the goods have come out of the country. And if you need to continue to travel, you can continue on that duplicate carnet. The only thing with the duplicate carnet is we can't close it immediately because the original carnet is missing. Now, if you have copies of that original carnet, like Amanda said, with stamps on it, that can also help, if there's any questions of, the in and outs of what happened prior to the carnet being lost. Let's see. Is there an exception regarding an EEI filing for ATA carnets?
Yes, there are. So first off, carnets are exempt from EEI filing unless they require a sensitive government licenses. So for example, BIS, ITAR, Department of State, Department of Commerce, any of those licenses that are the commodities on the carnet are required for, then they do have to file an EEI. And actually there is a code, and I think it's CAR in ACE for exports that allows you to file the EEI and tie it to a carnet shipment for those specific license purposes. If the carnet does not have a license or has the sort of what I like to call a non-sensitive license, like a CITES, the Convention on International Traffic in Endangered Species, so apparel, guitars that have Brazilian rosewood or pearl require CITES licenses. Those don't have to are still exempt from an EEI because they don't need to record it. The CITES is actually stamped physically in the carnet.
Okay. With involving custom regulation and trade policies, how should companies stay up to date to avoid unexpected delays and compliance violations?
Sure, I can take that one. My recommendation is be involved in a trade association. I mean, this is a perfect example with AAI that shares regulatory and compliance updates and check before every travel that there are no changes in hand carry requirements in that country. And this actually goes back to why, I personally think hand carry travel business policies for like hand carry commercial goods should actually just be one line, say call compliance, because the regulatory landscape is so fluid, and we're seeing that more and more today, and it's ever evolving. So having a static policy saved in an employee handbook that gets updated, let's say every couple of years, is not exactly the best approach in today's regulatory environment, in my opinion. So, there's a lot of associations out there that do regular policy updates and regulatory updates, informing their members. I know AEI is very, very good at sharing that information.
Okay, Yolanda, did you want to add?
Yes, please. If I can add something, well, my main rule is basically with that is being proactive, and how to be proactive with that. Apart of what Amanda say, I always suggest to have a process in place, a process with an owner, and that person should be responsible for tracking customs, all the trade updates, and mainly about the key countries, because I mean there are between 195 countries in the world, so it's very difficult to be updated about all of them. But at least if you have your key countries where you are gonna ship, so that is the most important. Then of course work always with expert, be close of custom broker expert and logistic expert who can help you and support you in these kind of cases, or if the company has any issue, if they are dealing by themselves with an OPC or carnet. And the most important, keep your team informed and prepared, because if part of your team is the one who are flying usually or frequently, at the end they need to be trained, they need to be aware what they need. If they are traveling to a specific country, they need to know first what is the visa that they need to make sure that the passport is valid for, it doesn't have an expiration for more than 6 months. Then in addition, they have to make sure that if they need any vaccination or anything, that everything is in place. So before put any person in a plane, make sure that we have all requirements, all the documents for export and import, that everything from, let's say, when the mission starts from point A to point B, we won't face any issue. Because otherwise, in the worst scenario, if that person is missing any of the documents, he will be rejected. He will be rejected before boarding, or in the worst, just when he's landing, that he will be back to the destination. So this is why it's very important to have this process in place. And of course, customs regulation are changing quite often, and it's worldwide, so it's quite a lot of rules. So my advice is be proactive and be close of the expert, and make sure that you have a key person, at least in your company, who is aware about the different changes that are going on.
Okay. What role do customs brokers, freight forwarders, or legal team play in supporting travelers with carnet documentation and border clearance?
Yeah, Kelly, I can grab that one. So your customs broker and freight forwarder are your key partners of yours, and they can provide the guidance on the ground insights for the best options. Even if they're not handling the freight, your forwarder, customs broker should be your true partner and consultant. I mean, I can speak for us at Rocket. We have offices and agents, partnerships in the majority of the world. There is not a destination we have not gone to, because music or sports definitely likes to challenge us in locations. It's a lot of fun. But we understand on the ground, we've experienced it, we can provide real life advice on how best to hand carry items to these destinations, and what really are the realistic expectations. Like I used that example before, this client of ours went online and Googled and found the times of windows that open of customs in Nuevo Laredo Customs Port, and needless to say, the information was wrong. So what we ended up doing is calling our office in Mexico and saying, hey, what are the times, where are the best locations, how can we get this fixed and make sure that the show still goes on the road? We at Rocket, obviously, we're a licensed customs broker, and we have the ability, with our partnership with Roanoke, to issue ATA carnets 24/7, not only in the US, but we also have the same appointment in the UK via the London Chamber. So we do offer support 24/7 when it comes to carnet shipments. We had recently a new client called us over the weekend and said, my carnet provider is not open. I need additional counterfoils. What can I do? Can you help? And we can definitely facilitate that, as we have printing abilities, and we are a 24/7 shop, because freight and trade moves 24/7, right? So anyways, the idea is to use experts in the field and rely on them. And I think to Yolanda's point in her guidance is have a person be the task owner and be the person to funnel that information to make sure that they are working with outside consultants where they need to, whether it's freight forwarders, customs broker, your onboard courier, and obviously the legal team should always be aware and have visibility into it. I mean, I think Yolanda, you brought up a good thing about visas. We had that recent situation, legal was called in because we're sending someone overseas and was concerned about immigration status, visas, and all that good stuff. And that's completely managed by legal. So there's a lot when it comes to hand carrying commercial goods for business travelers. And, like I said, a strong policy and a task owner, as Yolanda said, I think is great advice.
Okay, thank you. So we have some more questions in the chat. Let's see. What does the process look like for coordinating hand carrying of consumable items from export to import perspective? Do you always need to use a customs broker, or can the person perform both export or entry process by him or herself? Is there a list of countries where this is more standard or easier?
So this is a tough question to give a one-line webinar answer on, because it all depends. It all depends on what are the commodities. Like, for example, we were doing a trade show in South Africa for beauty goods, and all the exhibitors wanted to be as cost efficient as possible, and they were going to hand carry. And of course, on a lot of the hand carries with beauty, samples to give out the products. Well, for South Africa, well, yes, they can hand carry it. They can handle the clearance. We needed to let our agent in South Africa know in advance, because they had to get everything approved by South Africa's Food and Drug Administration. So we had to get the ingredients, we had to get the technical names of the ingredients, we had photographs of the labeling of the samples, and so on and so forth. So it was, and that is beauty supplies. That is obviously on the more streamer side, but it really depends. You can hand carry commercial, sorry, backing up. You can carry commercial cargo, hand carry that you're taking in as consumable, but it also depends on the country if they allow it. Yolanda's point was Brazil doesn't allow it, so you can't do it to Brazil, and that's just a non-starter before you even get started. So it's by country, commodity, value, and so on and so forth.
Okay, let's see. The next question is, we have some equipment that has been purchased by our engineering group. Oh no, we did that one already. Sorry. Okay. Argentina does not accept carnets. We want to hand carry tablets and handhelds for demos, and it will be temporary. What is our best option to get these through customs?
So I would have to call our office in Argentina to find out what is Argentina's specific requirements for hand carries of electronics into Argentina. Off the top of my head, I'm not entirely sure, because electronics can also be treated a little differently than other types of commodities. Yolanda, I don't know if you have any insights into Argentina.
No, in Argentina, of course, with the hand carry clearance, it will be possible, but the problem is how many tablets, because one should be possible, always that we have the right documentation. But of course, we have the limitation of the devices. You cannot fly a hand carry with 50 tablets, for example. So it's an example that we can check specifically if we know how many, for example. And yeah, with hand carry, as soon as we have the document, even if it doesn't have commercial value, with the right documentation, it's possible to export and import with an OBC.
Okay. All right, the next question we have are, what are your thoughts on rental equipment? For example, photo and video rental equipment used for foreign photo shoots. Should the carnet be filed by the renter or the owner of the goods?
So I think that in practice and in my experience, obviously we deal with this a lot. A lot of camera equipment is rented by photographers, filmmakers, and so on and so forth. And same with live performance touring. A lot of that equipment you see on stage that's going overseas is all rented. In my experience, most rental companies don't want to take on the responsibility of the customs document. And actually, they see that the rental contract is where the change in ownership happens of those goods. So you technically become the beneficiary cargo owner in that rental agreement transfer, which means, in their opinion, you should be handling all the carnets. But that also depends. If you work with a rental house that's willing to take on the carnet responsibility and trust that you're going to handle follow the hand carry procedures that they want to ensure that the carnet does not have any hiccups, then you could do it in the rental agreement. And I'm not sure if that question is coming from someone who comes into the United States to rent equipment to then from a rental house here and take it overseas. We see that a lot. And obviously ATA carnets are required to be in a US entity's name with a US identification number and a US address. So that would be a place, and we've done that. We've spoken to rental companies on behalf of some of our customers explaining when they're not a UK entity or a US entity that we will need the rental house as part of their contractual agreement to take on that responsibility, and that we would ensure on behalf of our mutual client to make sure that the carnet was handled so that the rental house did not have any liability or exposure.
Okay, the next question is, are carnets required for work laptops hand carried by business travelers?
No, they're actually not. They were in the beginning, back in the day when laptops became a thing. We had a couple of business travelers. Actually, I was at the US Council in those days, and they would, I don't know if it was mixed between testing the carnet as well with their business laptop, but no, laptops, if you're traveling with one laptop, and I think Yolanda made that point about the tablets, it depends on the quantity. So, I mean, we travel all the time, laptop, cell phone, and tablet, and we don't need to present any customs declaration. However, it will come up as a question, and I know I can use Canada for example, is if you're going into Canada for business purposes, and specifically if you're in the software sales, you're going to need a specific type of visa. And that might be alerted if they flag you, look in your suitcase and say, oh, you've got laptops, you've got tablets, you've got all this electronic equipment. Why are you coming into our country? And are you coming in for software sales purposes? I've personally actually experienced that going into Canada. And it was interesting. So it's always, we think Canada's our friends to the north. That's super easy, jump on a plane, but you need to be aware of those additional requirements.
Okay, is there a list of countries that allow self-clearance for hand carry?
As far as I know, and I've been checking that for that, there is not. So I created one manually for company, for example. But yeah, as far as I'm aware, there is no like official a list where you can see which countries they allow self clearance or not. And mainly also, you need to always double check because sometimes it's changed. It depends of the country. It change also the value that is allowed by self clearance. Like for example, in Europe Union, it works sometimes like once, but if we go into export and import, for example, in Germany, you can enter always that the goods are below 1,000 euros. You can export just easily with the stamp, so you don't need the power of attorney. But for example, if you go to another country of Europe Union, maybe just with the value of 50 euros, you will need all required documents. So it's gonna depend of the country. And as far as I know, there is not a like official list.
Okay.
I think to add to Yolanda, I think it's just, we've all experienced it and we collect this knowledge in our heads. And so it really is having that point person working with outside consultants and experts who have the experience on the ground, and then just checking in every time, you're going to have business travelers go out, just to make sure that nothing's changed, because it is a very fluid regulatory landscape we're living in.
Great.
It's every day totally different. So we must check really every day just to make sure that the person who is traveling doesn't face any issue.
All right, thank you. Okay, the next question, I could take this one. If I lost my ATA carnet and I have pictures of the original carnet with the stamps, how am I going to close it out with the physical document? So without the physical document, the carnet will actually remain open for 13 months after the expiration date. With the copies or the pictures of the original carnet with the stamps, we'll be able to provide that in case there's a claim issued, and that would prevent it going into that claim status. So as long as we have the proof, there won't be a claim issued, and that can be closed out, but the carnet itself will remain open for 13 months. If no claim is issued after the 13 months, the carnet would automatically close out. But we do have to have the original physical document in order to close that carnet out. Okay, the next question, if a company wants to outsource the coordination support of hand carrying activities, like to a freight forwarder or custom broker, what should the company look for in those third parties? What capabilities do they need to have? And what should we be expected?
Yeah, I can. Do you want to go, Yolanda?
Yeah, I can take it. So very easy question from side, because basically you just need to make sure that they have a team who has the knowledge for hand carry, that they have really an OBC product, how we call it. Why? Because if they don't have that product, so they cannot offer that kind of service, it means that maybe they have the lack of knowledge. And really regarding hand carry, you need to be ready, not because at the end it's not only about moving the cargo from one point to another, it's about the person who is going to carry also the goods, that it should have the right knowledge and the right documentation, the right visa, and to make sure that he knows if there are customs involved, that he knows about the process. So this is why it's quite crucial. And I really advise to, if let's say if you need to hire a company, to make sure yeah, double check that the company has the right knowledge and the right team that can support you for it. And I'm not sure, Amanda, if you can add something else.
Absolutely. Make sure the company knows and has expertise in hand carrying. It's essential. And if you're wanting to do carnets and use carnets, make sure that they are absolute experts in carnets, because carnets are amazing. They can save you a lot of money. But if they're not addressed timely when mistakes happen, then they can cost you a lot of money. So the idea is make sure they're experts. And I can actually tell a fun story from our side of the house. We have a client. He's a very, very, very well-known musician. Cannot name names. He does not like sending his tour equipment, and he's not a small touring musician. He does not like sending them freight, period. He wants to send them as excess luggage in a commercial airline along with him in the plane. And that's, as Yolanda's stories of all the big box. I mean, you can imagine road cases and road cases of equipment. So we had one of our team members here actually lived on the road with him and was handled all his customs clearances for the hand carries in all the countries he went into, kept the equipment moving, booking it on the commercial flights. Where she couldn't get commercial, she'd have to do charters to make sure they beat him to where he was arriving next to perform. So it really is looking for partners that can tell you stories that they've experienced and have people on the ground that know what they're doing.
Okay. The next question is, who would be filing the claim? So this is going back, I think, to the missing carnet. I can answer this. The claim would be filed by the country that the goods were in. So any foreign country. So if it goes into, let's say it goes into the UK, it was stamped in but not stamped out, there's no proof that the goods came out of that country, UK customs can file a claim on those goods. That looks like it's our last question. Is there anything else that you guys wanted to add, or any more questions? No, I think we're good.
Just to add from my side, because I believe the person who asked about the tablets, I think she also wrote that there are 4 tablets. So I believe if the number is 4, it's possible by hand carry, but I really will need to double check with the custom, because usually we work with custom expert within the countries, just to make sure that it's allowed. And of course, always double check with the airlines, because it depends on the airlines. Some of them, they are more flexible than other. But for tablets, I believe according to IATA regulations, of course, it depends on the size and the type of, let's say, tablet that it is. But I believe according to the last regulations, it should be possible. But I will need to double check. I cannot confirm like that. If it's 1 for sure, I can't confirm. More, I will need to double check.
Yeah, and I can add the reason why behind that is because of lithium ion batteries and the burning power. So
Exactly.
Commercial airlines with passengers on board, you are restricted of how much lithium ion batteries can be in any one place on the plane. So yes, we assume that most people have 1 laptop and 1 tablet, which is why those are allowed under IATA's regulations. However, if you are one person bringing on 10 lithium ion batteries and checking it in the whole of the plane, you increase the probability of a potential fire. And so they're very, very strict regulations on lithium ion batteries.
Okay, there is another question about what other countries are not advisable to hand carry?
Well, there are few, of course, the ones that they are, as I mentioned before, if you put yourself in the shoes of the person who is traveling, all countries who are in, they are not safe, or they are in war, or they have a restriction. For example, if there are a list of countries, if you are dealing with US business, you cannot deal with business, and you cannot fly an OBC to these specific countries that they are in the ban list, like Yemen, Afghanistan, Iraq, all these kind of countries. And then there are some countries, like for example, India, that they authorize the Hungary clearance, but lately they have some restriction. So only you can fly to one specific airport to do clearance, and sales clearance is allowed. It depends of the goods, and it depends, of the value of the goods. For example, in Delhi, but at the moment it was only of the airport in India was allowed for Hungary without any issues. And if we talk another example that is, I think, is the most, because there is quite a lot of traffic with this country, is China. China, as of today, doesn't allow the general Hungary clearance. Since the COVID-19, they stopped it. Before used to be possible to do the Hungary clearance in China, export and import. Nowadays is banned. However, they make some exception in Beijing, but the number of hours are limited. So for example, if let's say if there is a long line, usually it's from Monday to Friday, from 9 until 5 p.m. But imagine if there is a long line and the cargo is not clear before 4, so it means that your cargo will be whole until the next day. So for these kind of routes, usually what we advise is to go always via Hong Kong. Is the faster and the safe, because via Hong Kong you can do the clearance 24/7. So at the moment, I will say Brazil is one of them, and China at the moment, and of course all countries that they are not safe and they are in the, let's say, in the prohibit list. Let's call it like that.
All right, we have one last question. They're asking for advice if you use a carnet for it says your advice if to use carnet for TIB then. I'm not sure.
Use a carnet versus a TIB, I think might be the question.
Yeah.
So in that case, again, it all depends. It all depends on the value, and what's going to cost you less, and how easy depends on the country, the value, and the cost. So for example, we always say if you're going into Canada, and now this is changing a bit with CARM, I will say that. But historically, we would say going into Canada, if you're going in once, you're only really going to have an exposure of 15% GST, depending on the municipality or province you're entering in through. We'd say just do a TIB. It's much easier. And we do a border product that actually solves that. We have a lot of, obviously, musicians and film going across the border. If you're going into Canada twice, then the TIB is actually going to cost you more, but the carnet will be cheaper. So again, it all depends, to answer that question, on commodity value, commodity type, and country if they accept TIBs.
Okay. This question is, can I use the carnet for a temporary shipment that the item will be modified somehow, like a repair?
No. Repair or replacements are not allowed, because there is change in value on those items, and every customs administration has specific regulations that address the change in value for repair or replacement parts when returning them to home country for that repair or replacement to be done. So they cannot be on an ATA carnet. However, if you're, we've had examples, like we had big movie production in Morocco, and tons of carnets, tons of equipment. Something broke while in Morocco, and there was no place to have that camera equipment, highly specialized camera equipment, fixed. So it came back to the United States to be fixed, to return to Morocco. Now, the original intent of that carnet was not for repair or replacement, but it happened during the life of the carnet. So that was sort of like an exception, if you will. But any intended repair or replacement. Now, if you're using tools that are going to be used to repair and be returned, that's perfectly fine. It's just none of the components or parts that will be put in for repair can be on an ATA carnet.
All right. Well, it doesn't look like we have. Oh, wait, one more. What's the rule of thumb for personal photo gear that can look professional but is recreational?
Oh, I've had this question a few times throughout my career. German customs is going to require a carnet whether you like it or not. years ago, we had a client call when I was at the US Council, and he kept saying, I am a personal photographer, but every time I go into Germany, they want me to pay duties and taxes to enter Germany. I'm doing nothing business wise. And they keep telling me to have a carnet. And, our answer is always like, well, carnets are for business purposes, not personal use. So we went around and around in circles. And basically, at the end of the day, if it's easy to clear going in, if it looks super professional and you don't want to have customs delays, you don't want to have questions, the carnet gives you that guarantee that customs knows they have a guarantee, customs knows you're going to come back out. It depends on how sensitive you are with cost, how sensitive you are with waiting lines and customs and countries. And if you're going to Germany, just definitely do the carnet.
Okay, last question before we close. Is testing of an item in another country allowed under a carnet?
I'm sorry, what was it first? Testing?
Testing of an item in
Testing.
another country, yeah, allowed under a carnet.
Yeah, absolutely. Equipment goes regularly around the world. We do a lot of hot weather testing for automobiles, cold weather testing for automobiles in the US and globally and other countries where they want to do the actual testing and the test facilities are. And we do those on ATA carnet. As long as there's no physical change to the equipment while being tested. I think that's the fine line. If the test does physically change the item, then that cannot be on a carnet. But if it's just going in to be tested, no problem. Carnets are a great solution.
All right. Well, that was our last question. Thanks, Amanda. Thanks, Yolanda. Before we close, please note that AAEI will send a short survey out to all attendees, and we encourage you to respond. This webinar has been approved for credit. The verification code for obtaining credit for participating in this event will be shared via email shortly following the event. AAEI's 104th Annual Conference and Trade Day is approaching quickly on June 26th and 27th in Washington, D.C., featuring a great lineup of programming you won't want to miss. Please use the link or QR code provided to learn more and register. AAEI would like to thank Rocket Cargo for sponsoring this webinar and making programming like this possible available to members in the trade community at large. And big thank you to our panelists and to all of you for joining us today. Have a wonderful day.